Hey everybody, 2021, hallelujah is all I gotta say. Today's topic is innovators versus imitators. And what this basically means to summarize for you is an innovator is the person or the company or the business who came up with the idea that said, let me challenge the norm. Let me challenge tradition and let me take this challenge on headfirst and come up with a way, whether it's to make something more efficient, whether it's to make something more high quality, whether it's to make something that can actually reduce costs, whether it's to make something that's better for the environment. There's a million different reasons why innovation is so important. Innovation is everything to who we are as Americans. It's everything to humanity in terms of how we've evolved over time. So that's what I'm thinking in terms of innovators. In terms of imitators, I don't want to say that like it's a bad thing. The old cliche saying is that imitation is the best compliment that you can get. So especially in a capitalistic society, it is critical that there is imitation out there and that imitation can ultimately drive competition. So again, not necessarily saying that being an imitator is a bad thing, but I will, for the most part, be discussing from my perspective and in my opinion, there's huge value in innovation. The first kind of angle that I want to talk about is kind of sharing some observations in terms of consumer behaviors when it comes to innovation versus imitation. What I kind of find fascinating is it really kind of shows, I think, the impact of marketing in our country, and I'm sure in Western culture in general, that people tend to like have value upon a brand. Maybe even unearned value, where just because it's familiar, they'll kind of stick with a brand and they'll kind of sit in that brand and wait and hope and go, hey, sounds like there's something real cool going on with one of their competitors in this product or this service. But because I'm familiar with this brand, I'm just gonna kind of hold out and wait until the brand I'm comfortable with finally gets around to doing what the innovator did. Take, for example, Google Suite versus Microsoft Suite of products. Google Suite is 100% cloud-based. It's been 100% cloud-based since they started. Microsoft being more software-based and program-based, that's where things started. And that software was something specifically we'd have to like download to our laptops or our PCs. All of the memory and everything that supported that particular program existed within that particular device. In a cloud-based situation, it has nothing to do with the device. Obviously, you have access anywhere you have access to the internet, you're going to have access to that cloud-based application. So I look at something like this, and I know for our business and on our team, about 2 years ago now, we actually migrated 100% away from Microsoft over to Google Suite. And it was one of these moments where I'm like, why didn't we do this sooner? You know, we're 100% remote working. We have been since we started 8 years ago. Every single aspect of it, from live docs to live sheets and all of the group and team interaction that we did, it just made so much sense. And it made so much sense to me that as I started interacting with our clients, about 90-ish% of these situations, they might even be using Gmail. They might even went as far as using Google Drive, but yet they're still sitting inside of Microsoft products. Like they were still kind of just had this weird loyalty. They made assumptions that Microsoft Word was somehow different than Google Docs, or Microsoft Excel was somehow different than Sheets, or PowerPoint was somehow different than Google Slides. There was just a lot of assumptions and just this, again, weird brand loyalty that wasn't necessarily earned. And ultimately what it ended up doing is it created a lot of problems and chaos. As a matter of fact, I know here in Baltimore County, for our kids, and when they went to virtual school, this is the exact setup that they had. They had this like weird, oh, we are using Google Meet, but we're going to use a whole bunch of Microsoft products. And oh, by the way, we're going to throw in Chromebooks there for a lot of folks, but not necessarily have the right application. So it just created a lot of chaos. And again, I just found myself sitting back and going, why? Like, why would anybody do this? Why wouldn't they just go over to Google? And the answer I've gotten time and time again is because Microsoft is what's familiar. Change feels hard. The point I'm trying to get across to you is that don't give brand loyalty to anything, quite frankly, that hasn't earned it from you. Don't allow change or fear of change to stop you from going to that innovator or going to the originator and getting the best and the most cutting edge potential tool, service, or product. A few other examples that I'd like to offer up to you in terms of innovators versus imitators. We shared Google versus Microsoft, Sprint cell phones. Again, this was an innovator, an originator in terms of the type of plans, like the family plans, the sharing plans, also the different networks that were available. other carriers came along after this happened. Southwest Airlines, folks, their business model in terms of Airbus was the first, and a whole lot of other airlines trying to play catch up and figure out how to do it, and they still haven't figured it out, haven't caught up with the leader, the innovator. Aldi, again, a business model that's genius. Now you've got plenty of other grocers out there who are trying to catch up and do the same thing and get competitive. Chick-fil-A revolutionized fast food. A lot of other fast food industry are trying to catch up with them. Dunkin' Donuts did a full overhaul. If anybody here went out and did their MBA in finance, one of the test cases that are evaluated is always around Dunkin' Donuts and their franchisee model and completely reinventing that. And also taking it a step further, by the way, and being an imitator. However, despite being an imitator, they were able to take the custom high-end coffee market of Starbucks and reinvent it within their business model. And we'll get to the how to do an imitation correctly here in a second. The big dog. Who's the big dog? What pops up in your head, folks? An innovator that just killed it and no one at this point can even come close to touching is Amazon in terms of an online marketplace. And really, it's not so much that their marketplace is the innovation, because again, eBay was around, there's plenty of other large retailers that did the same thing, but what they mastered and nailed was the delivery component, a delivery strategy that many are trying to replicate at this point and are struggling big time, especially in this past year of COVID, to say the least. So those are some examples to just kind of process and really maybe challenge yourself and say to yourself, why? Why am I brand loyal when this brand isn't necessarily the innovator? Why am I afraid, and why am I letting fear dictate to me what to try in terms of innovation and tools that can be out there? So that's where we're at. So how can imitation be something really good? Let's talk about that, because it can be. It can actually be something pretty fantastic. But there's some qualifiers for imitation to be fantastic. One, whatever you're imitating, you have to do it better from day one than the innovator. The other part about, you got to do it cheaper. So if you can't do it better and cheaper to the customer, then you're really not competitive in that space. And unfortunately, there's a lot of that type of imitation that's going on out there. Again, I'll give an example of Walmart being way behind the eight ball. Any person who's worked for Walmart will tell you that they were not strategic enough to compete with Amazon when Amazon first started taking off years ago. And they didn't prepare because they really thought that this in-person aspect of shopping was going to continue to retain value, which it hasn't. And so the problem is now their supply chain and all the way through to delivery is a mess, and they're still continuing to try to compete. And, maybe there's still some components where people say, hey, let me price compare between Amazon and Walmart. And in some cases, it's a little bit better. But in other cases, they're just not price competitive. And also, in some cases, you might get free shipping. In other cases, you won't. And certainly, they're going to struggle to hit that 2-day prime time frame that you can get from Amazon. Those are just things to kind of bear in mind when you're looking at an imitator and saying, is the imitator, are they doing it better, or are they doing it for less expensive for me as a consumer? So those are just things, again, to contemplate for yourself and start to determine really what are the impacts and what are those factors that are affecting your decisions. So what's the message? And I'm going to direct this message pretty specifically towards not only consumers, but also leaders. So business leaders, organizational leaders, any person that's out there in a position of making decisions. The best advice I can give to you is make it your business to always be out there seeking out the innovators. Don't get complacent. Don't sit back and just say, well, this is the way we've always done things. Oh, this is fine. This is who we've always worked with. This seems to be working for us. Or again, give credit to tradition where it's not deserved. To be candid with you, I'm not a big believer that there's a place for a whole lot of tradition in business. There's plenty of other aspects of our lives and family and religion and ceremonial aspects that tradition has a lot of value. But when it comes to business, if you want to be the best at what you do, you're going to have to be willing to let go of a lot of tradition and move forward and focus on how can I actually be the best. And a lot of that's going to come through innovation and the resources that you use and how innovative they are. So take time, research, test, and you're going to ultimately benefit from going with the expert, and then you can also benefit from their knowledge. Also, always stay open-minded to innovation. Here's the other part, and this was like a really cool thing that I thought about as well. When you've got a service or product provider who has something new, they want to try something out. never be afraid to be the guinea pig. And what I mean by that is that you actually have such a huge influence happening at that time in terms of feedback and requests that is tremendously valuable, first of all, to the innovator, but it's also valuable to you. One, you're probably going to get it at the lowest price that you possibly can. I know a lot of various software and applications that are out there will actually have spotlights for anybody who's willing to test out their software and get it for practically free, if not free entirely. So that's a great piece of advice to business leaders out there that are looking, is to go with an innovator or go with like a startup on an application and be willing to be their tester. Us ourselves, we've done this, and also we've had a number of clients that have been in this position, for example, like an applicant tracking system, and needless to say, it literally saved them hundreds of thousands of dollars. So just keep that in mind. Not only research, seek out innovation, but don't be afraid to be the guinea pig. The other part is recognize that it really means something when, as a consumer, we're willing to support small businesses. And I think we hear this in a lot of different ways. And I think it's easy to think local sometimes and say, hey, if I physically walk into a shop or if I go to the online shop for a local shop, that means something. And it does, don't get me wrong. But there's a lot of small businesses out there that don't just function on a local level, and they function in a lot of different ways. They're doing things that maybe support the environment. Maybe they're not the cheapest that's out there. They're not going to be the least expensive, but they've taken something like a mattress or a toothbrush and they've said, let me do a business model that's innovative in terms of manufacturing and supply chain and delivery and services or subscription services. Let me do this in an innovative way. And then also, by the way, I'm doing it with being thoughtful about the environment and not being another product manufacturer that's contributing to destroying our planet. That's another thing to just think of and to say, maybe it's worth to spend a little bit more money to go with a new small business or an innovator, because the benefits are not just about saving me money. The benefits are about getting the best of the best at a fair price and is going to help another small business. The last part is, it's a really simple statement. There is no harm that comes from innovation. Nothing. Innovation only provides huge benefits, and whether that's through innovators learning and succeeding, or innovators learning and failing, or learning along the way and making changes and updates, it is going to benefit the larger market all the way through to the consumer. So again, I think supporting innovation and believing in it as a really positive thing is good. I know that my company, and I'll make a little bit of a pitch and a plug here for what we do at Entity International Solutions, specifically within our Flex Recruiting Services division. This company was based on building out a fourth methodology of recruiting. And there were 3 traditional methodologies that have literally gone back to the beginning of time in the old school human resource days. But these 3 methodologies somehow continue to just be what's out there: in-house recruiting, staffing agencies, or contract recruiters. Those have been around forever. And I saw a gap in the market, and I said there was a problem and it needed to be solved. And the only way to solve it was through an innovative approach. What's crazy about this whole thing is, as passionate as I am, and every single one of our team members are about Flex Recruiting Services, and that's the name of the fourth methodology, is that the struggle was just trying to explain what we're doing to prospective companies who had a need for a supplement to their existing recruiting strategies and needed a supplement, an ideal check every single box. And a lot of times the talent leadership couldn't even get past this idea of like not forcing us into one of those traditional boxes. And they also couldn't get past pre-COVID the idea that what we did was 100% remote, and the resources and the technology that we were using to do that really successfully. Flash forward, January, 2021, we're still, of course, in the middle of a pandemic, but nonetheless, like, people have had to be living through this now for 10 months. There is such a demand now for what we do. The conversations have completely shifted. And not only are we getting calls in terms of like referrals and people hunting us down and just a more openness in terms of the conversation, but the bottom line is that there's now a need that's been driven it. And I think to myself, man, how sad is this? Like, it literally took a pandemic for companies to wake up and say, why are we doing things the traditional way? And oh my gosh, we need another solution. So I hope that this information offers something to everyone here, whether it's on the professional side of your life or on the personal side as a consumer, to really not be afraid to challenge yourself and really push yourself to say, there's value in innovation, there's value in supporting businesses out there that are innovative. There is nothing wrong with questioning tradition. There is nothing wrong with doing things differently, even if it's just from like a trial or a pilot's perspective. So that's my 2 cents in terms of hot topics. So for folks that are watching this for the first time on YouTube, hit that like button, hit the reminder button. And thank you so much for your time. And I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope to see you guys next week.